Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you my thoughts on all of Square Enix's upcoming titles. If you haven't been keeping up with the news, Square Enix has way too many games in its pipeline. Some of them AAA, some of them indie looking, some of them developed firsthand, some of them published. It's just a lot of games, and with so many, instead of making a video on every single one of them, I figured I'd make one video where I let you know what I'm anticipating, what I'm a little bit weary about, what I'm excited for, what I definitely need to see more of before I make up my mind. We got a lot of games to get through, so let's get started. So first I want to start with games that have definitive release dates. I think it's just easier to start with that instead of going in random orders for all the games that they have coming out. So with that, I'm going to start with Live Alive, which is releasing on July 22nd, 2022. Now, this was originally released back in 1994 exclusively for the Super Famicom in Japan. It's a cult classic amongst RPG aficionados, and I've never gotten to play it. You follow 8 different characters across the world and time itself, and it mixes a ton of gameplay styles, themes, music, and designs. It's being remade in HD 2D, and I'm always excited to see this style applied to retro games or new games that want a retro feel. Now, it does have a demo, and I have played it. And honestly, while I definitely could tell I liked the game from the demo, if I didn't know the game's legacy, it might not be the kind of demo that sways me in the direction of buying the game. All 3 chapters in it are cut short very early on, and yeah, they do that to avoid spoilers, but it never really felt like I got enough time to judge the individual characters or the stories that were there, just leaving me hanging on a little too thin of a thread. Now, knowing what I know, I'm still excited. I just think the demo could have been done better. This one's like an 8 out of 10 for me. It's very close to coming out. It's an iconic game, and it's one I've never played, so I get to experience it for the first time, and that's really exciting to me. It also fills out the week before Xenoblade 3 comes out fairly well. Now, our next game in this video is going to be the Dio Field Chronicle, which actually had a surprise live stream today showcasing about an hour of gameplay. Now, if you don't remember this game, it was unveiled back in March's State of Play alongside Valkyrie Elysium. Where's that game's live stream, Square Enix? Now, it's an SRPG that mixes real-time movement and turn-based decision-making, more like a wait mode if I had to call it anything, and it does these things simultaneously. Now, after Triangle Strategy, I'm looking for more SRPGs to play, and this game's art, its setting, and its gameplay look promising. I don't know how they'll be over the course of a full campaign, and that's always a concern when you're playing a slower game, a strategy game. Will the strategy that they're asking me to involve myself in actually be engaging past the first few hours of the game? And I couldn't really tell that from the first hour. It just looked like it would be good, so I hope it continues to improve as you play it. This one gets like a 7 out of 10 for me. That could change in the coming months, but after seeing what I saw, I still feel like I need to see more. Fortunately, it actually has a demo coming out on August 10th, and so I'll just have to check that out, and then it will release on September 22nd, 2022. Now with that, let's jump ahead to October, where we have a AAA title that's releasing in the form of Forspoken. This is the next action RPG being developed by Luminous Studios, the same studios that made Final Fantasy XV. Forspoken is a story about Frey, a woman trapped in the fantasy world of Altia. She uses magic to traverse vast landscapes and sling spells to defeat enemies. The game totes unparalleled movement and features a spellcasting system that lets you adjust to your needs mid-battle. Now, despite generating a lot of initial buzz, the rest of the game's marketing and news really hasn't held up. It actually did a deep dive a few months back on, I believe, GameSpot's website, but it doesn't really feel like that got a whole lot of media attention, maybe because it was locked all to one site. It just feels like maybe Square Enix is too wrapped up in their well-known franchises to give this one the attention it needs to be successful, or at least the marketing it needs to make sure people know that it exists still. This one's also kind of like a 7 out of 10 for me. When a company doesn't exude confidence, I don't have much either, but deep down I want this game to be really good. I love the visuals when I first saw it, the spells, and what it's based on. It had a really good initial feel that they just haven't kept up with. It's slated for October 11th of 2022, but I'm not gonna lie, again, with them not really saying much, I can't help but feel like that's not going to be the release date by the time October rolls around. Next up, we have another October release in the form of Star Ocean: The Divine Force. I just want to call it Star Ocean 6, but it seems like they've dropped the 6 from the title, so I'll just have to call it The Divine Force. But Star Ocean is returning. I'm honestly surprised, because it's been a rocky time for the Star Ocean franchise. 5, I can't imagine did super well. It was a very game. And the mobile game really didn't break out into the market. However, I mean, they recently did a big stream on their Japanese channel, released a bunch of English trailers and gameplay explanations, and I have to admit, it looks better than I expected. The gameplay, the UI, it all actually looks pretty good. But the characters don't. The lip sync and the character faces are like porcelain dolls. And while that's kind of a Star Ocean thing, that doesn't mean I just forgive it just because they're used to it being that way. And not to mention, after 5... I'm a bit hesitant to be excited, even if the trailer and gameplay systems look pretty good. Now, on just the gameplay, I'd say it's like an 8 out of 10. It just looks like it'll be a good time. But with the pedigree and the fact that the characters look kind of messed up, and if any sort of slip up in the gameplay occurs during however long this game is, it's really going to detract from it. I think I realistically have to give it more like a 5.5 or a 6 out of 10. It releases just a few weeks after Forspoken, if Forspoken actually releases in October, and with this game releasing on October 27th. So I hope that month isn't double the disappointment and is instead double the fun. Now let's flip our gears a little bit, because a game that just got announced is actually coming out in November in the form of Harvestella. This was announced at the recent Nintendo Direct, and it appears to be the mix of a lifestyle game and a traditional action RPG, causing many to refer to it as Square Enix's Rune Factory. You may not know this, but I really like games that mix traditional town life with RPG elements, whether you're running a shop or building up a town as a base of operations. The merchants get more materials, and you're often just going out in order to build up your resources and your home. Now, one game that I really like, not quite the same style of game, is Recettear, which is a personal favorite, Capitalism Ho. With that being said, I don't have much bad to say about the unveiling, and it's nice to see something like this in Square Enix's pipeline. It gets a solid 8.5 out of 10 for me, excitement-wise. I just need to see if that rating holds as they unveil more information. Now, the last game on this list with a definitive release date is Dragon Quest Treasures. This was also unveiled at the recent Nintendo Direct, and it's another offshoot of the Dragon Quest franchise that involves collecting ally monsters and traversing the world to look for treasure. Honestly, I have no idea what the point of the game actually is, but Dragon Quest has a way of taking that kind of mystique, not really knowing what the purpose of the game will be when it releases, and then producing a really, really good game. Dragon Quest Builders is a great example of a title that I had no expectation for, but it was shockingly well executed. So with the pedigree of the franchise as a whole, and its offshoots having a similar pedigree, I'm going to give it like an 8 to an 8.5 out of 10 as well. I really hope it delivers, especially while we're waiting for the other Dragon Quest games that are coming out, but that team is just super consistent. I have no reason not to have a little bit of blind faith. Now, the next several titles in this video are going to be games with confirmed release windows. So, you know, something like summer 2023, for example. I bet you can tell one game that's going to be on this part of the video. With that being said, our first game in this section is going to be Valkyrie Elysium, which is currently slated for 2022. The Valkyrie Profile series is back, much to everyone's surprise. The franchise looks to be taking a dive into action combat as well, a running trend for Square Enix as of late, and my initial viewing of the trailer left me simply curious. However, I actually rewatched the trailer ahead of recording this video, and it looks a little better than I remember upon the first viewing. Maybe after hyper-analyzing Final Fantasy XVI, I just see more interactivity in the combos and the attack strings, or maybe the trailer's just running at a better frame rate than the first time I saw it. But outside of some stiff-looking character models and cutscenes, it looks pretty exciting to me. I am going to temper my expectations on this one, though, and give it like a 7 out of 10. It's definitely one of those titles where I feel like I need a second trailer or a gameplay explanation before I get really excited about it. And with it being slated for this year, I just wonder when it's coming out. You know, we got Dio Field Chronicle news. We know when that's coming out, and this was unveiled at the same time. So just going to be a busy last 6 months of the year, it seems. Now, the rest of the games in this section are also pretty heavy hitters. Valkyrie Profile is a storied franchise, but I don't think it's as storied as Final Fantasy VII. Our next title that we're looking at is Crisis Core Reunion, the remake to the PSP prequel to Final Fantasy VII. It focuses on Zack and his time in Soldier before the events of the original game. Now, I will say the PSP title had some kind of janky systems, especially its slot system, which appears to be returning, but it's still a pretty solid game, and I think it's needed a facelift for quite some years. No doubt this is because of how important some of these characters will probably be in the rest of 7 Remake's trilogy. It's also, honestly, just free money laying on the floor for Square Enix. We all knew the day they remade this, it was just money to be made. Now this one's like an 8 out of 10 for me. I remember feeling mixed about the gameplay when I played it way back when, but the story and the bosses were a pretty grand time, so I am looking forward to it. It's simply slated for this winter, and pre-orders have a placeholder date of March 2023, given that's the technical end date for this winter. Time to see how much we can stretch the season, I suppose. And of course, if we're talking about Crisis Core, we gotta talk about the other Final Fantasy VII title, the sequel to Remake and that of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Now, we haven't seen much of it, just a few audio voiceovers and a couple of scenes that many people will recognize from the original, but it speaks volumes about what they plan to achieve, along with some of the words from the producer and directors and developers. As many suspected, the remade Final Fantasy VII is not going to be a one-to-one retelling, as it instead appears to be setting itself up to be a semi-sequel to the original, or at least something that runs parallel to it. Whether this plays out well or not is up to the developers, and you know what? After the way Remake went, as someone who's not a very big fan of the PlayStation 1 era of Final Fantasy games, despite growing up on them, if this globe continues to impress, this one's gonna have to be a 9 out of 10 for me. I bet a lot of people expected that to be lower, but man, I really enjoyed Remake, and I have a feeling I'm really going to enjoy Rebirth as well. Now, it's slated for next winter, which for those unaware means at the earliest December 2023, and at the latest March of 2024. Again, time to see how much we can stretch out those seasons. And the last title in the release window section of the video, oh, come on, you knew this one was coming, Final Fantasy 16. It is easily my most anticipated game going into next year. A setting and story crafted by some of the most brilliant minds in Creative Business Unit 3. The writer of Final Fantasy XIV's Heavensward story, the composer Masayoshi Soken, a combat system handmade by Ryota Suzuki, who's worked on Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Dragon's Dogma, and Devil May Cry 5. And of course, director Hiroshi Takai and producer Naoki Yoshida at the helm. Of course I'm gonna dream of my dream experience. Now, the game is slated for summer 2023, and I really hope it is not late summer. I already just want to cryogenically freeze myself and skip everything else on the list that would have released beforehand just to get to the release of this game. Yeah, I don't think it's a surprise. It's a 10 out of 10 for my anticipation of this game. But it doesn't mean I think it's going to be a 10 out of 10 game. I'm sure it's going to have flaws and downsides, and I'm sure it'll be divisive because it's an action game. Even if it's an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10, I'll still be pleased with it. Time to go back to analyzing every possible pixel I can of every single thing they release for it. Alright, and for the rest of the titles in this video, they either have no confirmed release window or release date, or are titles I think really only warrant a brief mention, so this last section should go a little bit quicker. So next on the list is Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake. Man, the more Square Enix applies this whole HD 2D things to their retro games or makes new games with the style, the more I just want to see it used. I don't have much of a history with Dragon Quest. I really only played Dragon Quest 8 and 11 for the main numbered franchise. So for me, this is the perfect format to revisit it. It looks great, and it already has me hoping they give this treatment to the other retro Dragon Quest games. Makes sense they were doing 3 first if you know how it ties into more recent titles. This one's like an 8.5 out of 10 for me. I know so little about it, and I have no precedent to be more or less excited, but I just love the style so much, and I love retro RPGs, so I just don't see myself not liking this. Not to mention, like I said with Treasures, the Dragon Quest team just has such a solid foundation that it's hard to doubt them. Speaking of Dragon Quest, I don't think it's a surprise that the next thing on the list is Dragon Quest XII. Now, like I said, I don't have that much of a history, but I did play through Dragon Quest XI's initial release all the way through, and it was a super fulfilling RPG experience, almost too fulfilling with how long the game stretches out. Now, while the original release had a few downsides, such as the soundtrack having maybe 3 songs in it. 11S actually rectified this, and given recent events, I sincerely doubt the soundtrack for 12 is going to have similar issues. The only concern that I think anyone has is the team mentioning doing something quite different with this title compared to the prior ones. Given how much Square Enix has dipped into action combat, I think that's what most people are assuming this means. I'm all for change, but I know the franchise's fan base can hate the word, and on top of that, they've just been the pinnacle of consistency over the past several decades, so taking a risk like that is a little bit scarier for a franchise like this. So I'm waiting with bated breath to see what they mean by something different. Still, 9 out of 10 excitement for me. With how full of a game Dragon Quest XI was, and again, the other titles we mentioned in this video, I'd just be a fool to not be excited almost by default. No idea when it releases though, so hold on to your puffs while you wait. Okay, and I think the last big title to mention here is Kingdom Hearts 4. Now, the previous title left me just feeling kind of down about the franchise, even if the Remind DLC gave me more content. Don't even get me wrong. You know, I'm always down talking Kingdom Hearts 3. I do think it's a good game. It's better than a lot of other games I've played, but it's bogged down for so many hours before it gets good, and the gameplay system just proves that sometimes more is not actually better. I'm hoping the next step of the franchise learns some of its lessons from Kingdom Hearts 3, but I'm not that confident that it will. Now, despite this, I'm hanging on to like a 6 out of 10 excitement for this one. That really stings me to say, though. I mean, seriously, go to www.youtube.com/c/Xehanort1227 and see who pops up. Yeah, that's right, this channel I made back in high school to upload crappy Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix boss fight videos. And I desperately want to like Kingdom Hearts 4, I just don't have the confidence in the franchise to be blindly excited for this one. Now, there are other titles that Square Enix is producing or directing or developing or publishing that I think just deserve a couple of honorable mentions. Front Mission First Remake is actually slated for this summer, and I'm a huge mech fan. I know it doesn't seem like it, but I like games where you play as giant mechs and customize them, so I don't really know much about Front Mission First Remake, but when I see it, my Armored Core senses get tingling, so really curious to see how that turns out. You have Octopath Champions of the Continent, which is a mobile game, but man, it presents like a single-player game really well until you find where the gacha menu is, and it's fairly hidden in the UI. That's actually slated for July 22nd, if memory serves, so it's going to be coming out the same day as Live Alive. You have Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis, another mobile game that's basically the turn-based remake for Final Fantasy VII, covering all of the different contents across the Final Fantasy VII franchise, though released in a staggered fashion, and that I'm pretty excited for. You also have Stranger of Paradise's DLC. One of them just got dated for July 20th, 2022, just a couple days before some of the other titles on this list, and there's 2 more to come. I thought it was an okay game. There's definitely a lot of downsides to it, and it's not going to appeal to everyone, but I had fun playing it, and I think that was really all that mattered. And then, of course, you have all the patches for 14. I expect 7.0 will probably be around when 7 Rebirth actually releases, but I don't think I'm going to give you my excitement for each of the Final Fantasy 14 patches now, as opposed to doing it when they're actually going to be relative. And with that, I think that's going to be a wrap for this video. If there's a title I missed, let me know in the comment section below, and also list every game in this video and let me know what you're excited about. And if you want to type why, feel free, go ahead, don't have to, but at least give me your level of excitement in the comment section of the video below. Anyway, with that, I am off. I'll see you in the next one, and until then, take care.